What if one night could destroy everything? 7 years of marriage, trust, routines, the warmth of home. But what if, in a single moment, your reality starts to crack? Subtle details, strange phrases, a phone that suddenly became more important to her than you. A regular evening turns into the first fracture, and then an avalanche. He just wanted to know the truth, but when it was revealed, it became clear. There was no way back. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. The November air was sharp that evening, crisp enough to bite at my lungs with each breath. Sabrina had mentioned she'd be spending the night out with her friends, and I had no reason to doubt her. Left alone in the quiet house, I nursed a beer, flipping mindlessly through the television channels, the moving images barely registering in my mind. 7 years of marriage had made me intimately familiar with her routines, the little things, the unconscious habits that defined her. But something felt off that night. Her last message had been brief. Heading home soon. Love you. On the surface, the words were ordinary, unremarkable, yet there was a forced quality to them, an unnatural warmth that didn't sit right. Just past midnight, the sound of the door opening broke the silence. She entered with a soft laugh, her heels clicking against the hardwood. Her hair was slightly tousled, as if she had been caught in the wind, or someone's hands. Her cheeks were flushed, and a different scent clung to her, not the familiar perfume she always wore, but something heavier, deeper, masculine. I didn't say anything at first. I simply observed as she kicked off her heels, tossed her purse onto the counter, and let out a sigh, the kind of exhale that came from having an incredible time. "Good night?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She flashed a smile, too quick, too bright. "Yeah, it was fun." Her back was turned as she spoke, a subtle but telling move. "Just drinks and catching up, the usual." I nodded as if I believed her, but my gut twisted. I knew my wife, and something wasn't right. She curled up on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through messages, occasionally laughing at something on the screen. But there was a shift in the way she held it, closer to her chest, more guarded. I took a slow sip of my beer, suppressing the storm brewing inside me. No need to overreact, not yet. Better to watch, to wait, to let the truth surface in its own time. The days that followed were unremarkable on the surface. Sabrina moved through our routines with ease, smiling at my jokes, leaving soft kisses on my lips, texting me throughout the day just like always. But the unease in my gut never faded. Then, on Friday night, she mentioned she was going out again. "Another girls' night?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She nodded while fastening an earring. "Yeah, Aria and Chloe want to check out that new bar downtown." I studied her for a moment. She looked stunning, too stunning. A sleek black dress that I couldn't recall seeing in ages. Her hair styled in effortless waves, perfume lingering in the air just a bit stronger than usual. "All right," I said after a pause. "Enjoy yourself." She leaned in for a quick kiss, grabbed her purse, and glanced back at me. "Don't wait up." But I did. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was David, my best friend. "Hey man," I answered. He skipped the pleasantries. "Jeremy, listen, I'm at that bar Sabrina mentioned." I straightened. "Yeah, I know. She said she was out with the girls." David hesitated. "She is. But there are guys here too." A cold sensation crept through me. "What are you getting at?" "I've been watching her for a while. She's really close with one of them, laughing, touching his arm, hugging him. It looks bad, man." A hollow stillness settled over me. My grip tightened around the phone. "I'm coming." In seconds, I had my keys and was out the door. My knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as I drove, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. Sabrina, my wife, with another man. Laughing, leaning in close, her hands grazing his arm. The mere thought sent a fire through my veins. But before I could reach the bar, my phone rang again. David. They're leaving. I exhaled sharply. Are you sure? Yeah. She and the group just got into an Uber. The guy she was with went with them. My fingers curled around the steering wheel until my nails dug into my palm. All right, thanks. By the time I reached the bar, the neon lights still flickered against the packed crowd, music thrumming through the air. David stood near the entrance, a nearly empty beer in his hand. Tell me everything, I demanded. He sighed. She wasn't all over him, but it wasn't just friendly either. She kept leaning in, laughing at everything he said, touching his arm. His eyes met mine, steady. It wasn't how a married woman acts, Jeremy. I didn't answer right away. I simply nodded, my mind absorbing the weight of it all. You good? David asked. I swallowed hard. Yeah. My voice was empty, hollow. But I wasn't okay. I drove home, my thoughts tangled in a storm of anger, suspicion, and that sinking feeling of betrayal. The hours crawled by. 1 o'clock, then 2, still no sign of Sabrina. Finally, the front door creaked open. She stepped inside, reeking of alcohol, her face flushed, her movements slow and careless. I rose to my feet and waited. Where were you? I asked, watching as she slid off her heels with practiced ease. I told you already. We went to that new bar downtown, she answered, her voice effortlessly casual. I narrowed my gaze. That's odd. I spoke to David earlier. He mentioned he was there too, but he didn't mention seeing you. For a split second, something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty, hesitation. But she recovered quickly. Oh, right. We actually stopped somewhere else afterward, she added, rubbing her temple like she was trying to piece together the timeline. Maybe we had already left by the time he arrived. I watched her closely. She was lying. It was evident in the way she avoided my eyes, the way her voice carried just a little too much ease. But I didn't call her out. Not yet. I simply nodded, letting the moment pass. Maybe, I murmured. She smiled, brushing past me toward the stairs, but as I watched her retreat, a knot tightened in my chest. This wasn't paranoia. Something was wrong, and I intended to find out exactly what. The next morning, Sabrina stood at the stove, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. The tune was light, effortless, completely at odds with the woman who had crawled into bed at 2 in the morning with an excuse that didn't quite add up. She moved around the kitchen as she always did after a night out, as if nothing was amiss. To anyone else, she looked like the picture of normalcy, but I knew better. Then her phone buzzed against the counter. She ignored it. That was unusual. Sabrina was always checking her phone, Instagram, group chats, emails. She never left a notification unanswered, even if it was out of sheer habit. But this time, she didn't even glance at the screen. She acted like she hadn't heard it at all. And that made my stomach tighten. Another vibration. My eyes flickered from her to the phone just as it lit up. A name appeared. Ryan. Someone I didn't know. My pulse quickened. Maybe it was innocent, a coworker, an old friend. But the same instinct that had nagged at me the night before whispered something different. Who's Ryan? I asked, my voice deliberately light as I nodded toward the phone. She barely looked up from the stove. Oh, just a guy from work. Marketing team. We were going over a campaign last week. Smooth. Too smooth. I nodded as if I accepted the explanation, but something about it didn't fit. Sabrina wasn't in marketing. She worked in finance. What campaign? Her phone buzzed again. I caught the slightest shift in her demeanor, the way her grip tightened around the spatula, the brief press of her lips together. A flicker of tension. She was hiding something. But she didn't reach for the phone. Instead, she carried on as if nothing was wrong, kissing me on the cheek before heading upstairs to shower, playing her role flawlessly. I waited until the water started running. Then, heart pounding, I picked up her phone. We never kept secrets. We knew each other's passcodes. There was no hesitation as I unlocked it, and in an instant, my world collapsed. Last night was perfect. I can still taste you. Pain stabbed through my chest as I scrolled, my vision blurring. Wish we had more time. I miss you already. Then the photos. Sabrina, sitting in a dimly lit restaurant, a wine glass in hand, leaning into a man I had never seen before. Laughing, smiling, radiating happiness. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment. The messages stretched back for months, longer than I wanted to believe. Hotel reservations, inside jokes, plans for future weekends, pet names whispered through text. My grip on the phone tightened with every message I read. This wasn't just an affair, it was a relationship, a second life built behind my back. The shower shut off. I inhaled sharply, forcing my hands to steady as I placed the phone exactly where I had found it, my fingers trembling slightly as I withdrew. Upstairs, I heard her moving, the floorboards creaking beneath her steps as she dressed, unaware that the web of lies she had spun so carefully had just unraveled. In a few minutes, she'd come downstairs, smiling, pretending, playing the part of the devoted wife, acting as if she hadn't just destroyed everything we had built. I gripped the edge of the table, grounding myself. This wasn't the moment to confront her. Not yet. The next morning, clarity settled over me. I had enough evidence to end this, but I wanted more. Something indisputable. Something she couldn't talk her way out of. I wasn't going to ask her for the truth. I was going to make sure she had no choice but to face it. That same day, I hired a private investigator. Someone discreet, professional. Someone who had seen this kind of betrayal more times than he could count. Follow her, I instructed. And then, I waited. I gather every piece of evidence. Photos, videos, receipts, anything that solidifies the truth. The investigator gave a curt nod. Give me a week. I didn't have to wait nearly that long. Sabrina made it almost too easy. By the third day, I had everything I needed. Pictures of her draped over Ryan outside a bar, their fingers laced as they disappeared into a hotel, undeniable proof of an overnight stay. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was irrefutable. Any pain I had once felt had long since hardened into something sharper, a cold, unwavering resolve. That same afternoon, I sat across from my lawyer. I laid out the evidence, each incriminating detail laid bare. My voice remained steady, devoid of hesitation. I wanted a divorce, on my terms. The house was mine, purchased before the marriage, placing it safely beyond her reach. With the right legal strategy, she wouldn't get a cent from me. My lawyer assured me there was nothing to fear. The paperwork was filed, the process set in motion. The only thing left to do was erase her from my life completely. That evening, Sabrina made her usual exit. Out with the girls, she said, slinging her purse over her shoulder, pressing a light kiss to my cheek as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't been betraying me over and over again. The moment she stepped out, I made the call. The locksmith arrived within the hour. Change them all, I instructed. He complied without hesitation. By the time he finished, Sabrina was officially locked out. I went upstairs and methodically packed every last one of her belongings, clothes, shoes, makeup, jewelry, even those ridiculous scented candles she insisted on keeping everywhere. Once everything was neatly stacked by the door, I sat back and waited. At precisely 1:53 a.m. I heard it. The soft scrape of her key against the lock. A pause. Then the rattle of the handle, followed by a sharp knock, escalating into urgent pounding. And then her voice, confused and irritated. What the hell? I took my time reaching the door, finally opening it to meet her furious gaze. Jeremy, my key isn't working. Arms crossed, I met her eyes evenly. Yeah, because I changed the locks. She blinked, momentarily stunned. What? Wordlessly, I reached for the folder the investigator had compiled, flipping it open to reveal the damning images. Her and Ryan locked in an embrace, fingers entwined, vanishing into a hotel together. The color drained from her face. "Jeremy, we're done." My voice carried no emotion. "I know everything." She froze, eyes fixed on the evidence as if she could somehow will it out of existence. "Jeremy, this isn't what it looks like." A hollow laugh escaped me. Don't insult my intelligence. This has been going on for months. Lies, deception, sneaking around, coming home to me like nothing had changed. Her eyes glistened with fabricated tears. "Please, let's talk." I lifted a hand, cutting her off. "No, there's nothing left to discuss. You don't live here anymore." Her breath caught as I stepped aside, revealing the neatly packed suitcases by the door. "Take your things and go." Her lips parted, her breath uneven. "You can't just—" "I already filed for divorce," I interjected. "And this is just the beginning." That was when she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded, her voice quivering. "Jeremy, please, we can fix this." I shook my head. "No, you shattered this, and I'm done cleaning up the pieces." And then, I did the one thing she never expected. I lifted her bags and carried them outside without another word. She remained frozen in the doorway, watching in stunned silence as I placed them neatly on the porch. When I turned back, her face was ghostly pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Goodbye, Sabrina." Then, without a moment's hesitation, I shut the door in her face. The divorce was swift and merciless. Sabrina, of course, fought back. She played the remorseful wife, desperate to undo the damage. She sobbed in court, pleaded with my lawyer, flooded my phone with long, pitiful messages about how she still loved me. None of it mattered. I had proof. Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment she thought she had hidden. My lawyer dismantled her feeble attempts at a defense with ruthless efficiency, leaving her with no ground to stand on. By the end, she walked away with exactly what she deserved. Nothing. The house, mine, the savings, untouched by her hands. And Ryan? She moved in with him almost immediately, as if he was truly worth the destruction of 7 years of marriage. But their relationship barely lasted 4 months. One day, without warning, he left her. No explanations, no drawn-out goodbyes, just gone. As for me, I never wasted another second mourning a life that had never truly been real. The house, the place where I had once built dreams, where I had spent sleepless nights waiting for her to return, became nothing more than a monument to deception and wasted love. So I sold it and left the city, eager for a fresh start. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened. The weight of betrayal no longer lingered, no longer whispered doubts into my mind in the quiet hours of the night. I no longer lay awake wondering where she was, who she was with, what new lie she would tell next. It was over, and damn, it felt good. This story has come to an end. Betrayal is a blow that changes a person forever. Trust, built over years, can shatter in an instant. But it's important to remember, pain is temporary, and truth sets you free. This story is not just about infidelity. It's a lesson in self-respect and boundaries. No one is obligated to endure lies and manipulation. Sometimes the strongest decision is not to fight for the past, but to choose yourself and move forward. Love should be genuine, and relationships should be honest. And if someone doesn't value that, they don't deserve to stay in your life. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. Do you think betrayal is something distant? Something that happens to others, but never to you? So did he, until one small coincidence turned into a chilling wave of suspicion. Missing keys, expensive jewelry, secret messages. Seemingly small things, yet together they formed a sinister picture. He wanted to believe the best, but his intuition screamed otherwise. And when the truth finally came to light, it became clear. This marriage wasn't just cracking, it was already dead. But betrayal? That was only the beginning. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. At first, I refused to believe it. These things happen to other people, acquaintances, co-workers, even close friends, but never to you. You convince yourself that your relationship is different, that the late nights, the urgent calls during dinner, the sudden business trips are all just part of the job, minor disruptions in an otherwise stable life. That's what I told myself about Amelia. Her work had taken over, slowly at first, an occasional late evening, an early morning rush. But soon, it became all-consuming. She'd come home exhausted, barely acknowledging me before heading straight for the shower. Our weekends, once sacred, were swallowed by extra assignments. Things are crazy at work, she would say. I'm barely keeping up. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But it got harder. The little things built up. She stopped reaching for me in bed. The random messages she used to send throughout the day just to check in, gone. We had our own inside jokes, small traditions that made us feel connected, but now it felt like I was living with a stranger instead of my wife. Then came another business trip, 3 days away. I tried to push aside the unease creeping in, telling myself I wasn't the jealous type. It was just work, like always. But when she returned, something felt different. I was making coffee when she walked by, dragging her suitcase toward the bedroom. That trip was exhausting, she murmured, her voice thick with fatigue. I watched her disappear down the hallway, my stomach twisting. Something was off. Minutes later, as I passed by our room, something caught my eye. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, neatly packed clothes arranged just so. But peeking from beneath them was a delicate strip of black lace, lingerie, expensive. Unlike anything she usually wore. Amelia preferred soft cotton, cozy loungewear, not this. For a moment, I considered asking about it, but I hesitated. Maybe she bought it on a whim. Maybe it meant nothing. Still, the doubt settled deep in my gut. I told myself it wasn't worth an argument. So, I let it go, like a fool. 2 days later, Amelia borrowed my car. Her own was having trouble again. Something about the battery. She needed to run errands and asked if she could take mine. Without thinking, I handed over the keys. Just don't forget to fill up the tank, I joked. She gave me a quick smile before heading out. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave, I reached for my car keys. They weren't where I usually left them. I checked the kitchen counter. Nothing. The hallway table, empty. My jacket pockets, still no sign. A frown formed between my brows. I never misplaced my keys. Then it hit me. Amelia had them last. Maybe she forgot to put them back. I walked into our bedroom. The sound of running water came from the bathroom, steam curling through the cracked door. She was in the shower. Her purse sat on the nightstand, slightly unzipped. I hesitated. I had never gone through her things before, never felt the need to. But these were just my keys. Right? It wasn't snooping, just a quick check. I reached in, fingers searching for the key fob. Instead, they brushed against something small and smooth. A box. A jewelry box. My breath caught as I pulled it out, flipping it open. Inside, cushioned in plush velvet, was a diamond necklace. Elegant. Dazzling. Expensive. My stomach dropped. Where had this come from? One thing was certain, I hadn't bought it. If Amelia had treated herself, she would have shown it off, soaking in the compliments. She loved attention, but she hadn't mentioned this necklace. I stood frozen, the open box in my hands, my mind racing. First the lingerie, now this. Something was very wrong. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation, a gift from a friend, a work-related reward. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I barely spoke. She didn't seem to notice. Her attention was locked on her phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. Whatever conversation she was having, it held her completely. She didn't glance up, didn't sense the tension thick in the air, didn't ask if I was okay. When she finally fell asleep, I made a decision. I waited until her breathing slowed, steady and deep. Then, carefully, I reached for her phone on the nightstand, slipped out of bed, and settled into the living room. My hands shook as I unlocked it. I didn't want to find anything, but I had to know. I searched. Messages, normal, emails, routine, call logs, nothing suspicious, no unknown numbers, no late-night conversations. And yet, the unease wouldn't leave. No solid proof, no concrete evidence, just an unshakable feeling gnawing at my insides. I wasn't imagining things. Something wasn't right. But without anything tangible to back it up, I was left grasping at shadows. So the next morning, I made a decision. I hired a private investigator. Derek was a man of few words, practical and to the point. He asked only what was necessary, noted down the details, and set to work. At first, everything checked out. Amelia's schedule unfolded exactly as she had claimed, late nights at the office, then straight home. No secret detours, no suspicious rendezvous, no obvious signs of deception. For a brief moment, I wondered if I had let paranoia cloud my judgment. Maybe I had misread the signs. Maybe the growing distance between us was just the natural ebb and flow of life. Relationships shift. People change. But then, there was the unfamiliar lingerie tucked away in her drawer, the necklace hidden out of sight, and the way she was slowly but surely slipping away from me. No, this wasn't just in my head. I told Derek to keep digging. A few days later, she left for another business trip. She packed with careful precision, her hands moving methodically as she zipped up her suitcase, humming a tune I didn't recognize. I watched her from the bed, searching her face for any trace of unease, any crack in the facade. Nothing. She leaned in, pressing a quick, distracted kiss to my lips. "See you in 3 days, babe." And just like that, she was gone. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, Derek was already following. For 2 days, I was a wreck. My phone never left my grasp. Every notification made my pulse jump. Every second of silence let my thoughts spiral further. By the second morning, my nerves were frayed. My heart pounded in my ears, my body tense with anticipation. I had steeled myself for bad news, but when it finally came, it still knocked the air from my lungs. Derek called early. His voice was measured, calm, but his words cut deep. "Dominic, she's not alone," my breath caught. "What do you mean?" She checked into a hotel, with another man. A wave of nausea rolled over me. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. "Who?" I barely managed to whisper. Derek hesitated before delivering the blow. "Robert, her co-worker." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Suddenly, the late nights, the constant messages, the widening emotional gap, it all made sense. And then Derek twisted the knife deeper. He's married, too. I pressed my fingers against my forehead, trying to steady myself. My wife had been lying to my face, slipping away under the guise of work, acting like everything was fine. "I have photos," Derek added. "I'm sending them now." A second later, my phone buzzed. I hesitated, but I had to see. One tap, and my screen filled with images. Amelia and Robert at the hotel bar, their laughter unrestrained, their body language too familiar. Another shot, her fingers brushing his hand, her eyes on him in a way I hadn't seen in years. Then his arm around her waist as they stepped into the elevator. And finally, the picture that shattered the last shred of doubt, Amelia and Robert kissing. My stomach churned. That was it. That was all I needed. No more questioning, no more hoping for another explanation. That same afternoon, I walked into a lawyer's office and started the divorce proceedings. No deliberation, no second chances. I refused to give her room to spin a story, to make excuses, to manipulate the truth. She had made her choice, and she would have to face the consequences. The next evening, Amelia came home as if nothing had changed. I was on the couch when I heard the key in the lock. She walked in, dragging her suitcase, looking exhausted but content. She tossed her bag aside, stretched, and smiled casually. "Hey, babe, that trip was brutal. How was your weekend?" I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up my phone, turned the screen toward her, and let the evidence speak for itself. "Why don't you tell me, Amelia?" Her smile faltered. Her eyes flicked to the screen, scanning the damning images. Her and Robert at the bar, their hands touching, their bodies close, and finally, the kiss. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, Where did you get these?" My voice was steady, void of emotion. "Does it matter?" Her gaze snapped up to meet mine, and then she did something I'll never forget. She laughed, a soft, breathless, disbelieving laugh. "Dominic, this isn't what it looks like." A bitter chuckle escaped me. "It's exactly what it looks like." "No. She stopped, shaking her head as if she could somehow undo what had already been exposed. "It wasn't like that. I mean, yes, things happened, but what?" I cut her off, stepping closer. "But I wasn't supposed to find out." Her mouth opened, but no words came. And in that silence, I saw it. The truth. She was never going to tell me. Had I not uncovered the truth, had I not taken the step of hiring an investigator, she would have continued her deception, coming home to me, pressing her lips against mine right after they had been on him, lying beside me at night while giving herself to another man in some cheap hotel room. My jaw clenched, my entire body tense with a simmering rage just beneath the surface. She tried again, her voice unsteady, quieter this time. "Dominic, I didn't mean—" I silenced her with a sharp shake of my head. "I don't care, Amelia." My stare was unwavering, my voice like ice. "Pack your things. You're leaving." Her composure cracked, her frustration boiling over. "You're really going to throw away 7 years over this?" A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. "You did that the moment you walked into that hotel with him." Tears welled in her eyes, her hands shaking as she reached out. "Dominic, please. We can fix this. It didn't mean anything. I love you." I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. "Your things will be sent to your parents. You can explain why." Her face crumbled. A sob tore from her throat, raw, desperate, but I was unmoved. She reached for her suitcase with trembling fingers, her shoulders quaking as she made her way to the door. For a moment she hesitated, waiting, hoping I'd call her back. I didn't. She walked out. And me? I was far from finished. After she was gone, I sat motionless for a long while, lost in thought. Then, I took action. She wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed, as if her betrayal carried no weight. The first step was simple. I found her parents' contact and sent them the photos. Amelia and Robert at the hotel bar, their fingers intertwined in the elevator, whispering in the hallway, locked in a kiss outside their room. No explanations. Just one message. "This is who your daughter really is. I'm done with her. Expect her things soon." Then I sent them to Robert's wife. My words were brief, devoid of emotion. "Thought you should know. Your husband has been cheating with my wife." Her response came almost instantly, stark and final. "Thank you. I'm leaving him. No anger, no pleas for confirmation, just certainty." I stared at my screen, my grip tightening around my phone until my fingers ached. She deserved better than him. And I deserved better than Amelia. In just a few short hours, she had lost everything: her marriage, her home, her reputation. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. The first few nights alone in the house were strange. Not because I missed her, but because of the newfound lightness, the absence of tension. No more empty conversations, no more forced smiles, no more pretending. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. I made sure she left with nothing, not a penny, not a keepsake, not a single reminder of our life together that wasn't stained by her own betrayal. While her world fell apart, I rebuilt mine. I sold the house, moved into an apartment untainted by the ghosts of our failed marriage. I poured myself into work, into the gym, into anything that made me feel alive again. Then, weeks later, I heard the final twist of the knife. Robert had dumped her. After tearing apart 2 marriages, after throwing away 7 years with me, the man she had risked everything for discarded her like she meant nothing. When I heard the news, I nearly laughed. He had used her for what he wanted, a brief escape, a meaningless thrill, but he had never planned to keep her. She had lost everything for nothing. She tried reaching out a few times, but I never answered. Then, one night, a mutual friend mentioned seeing Amelia alone at a bar, drink in hand, a hollow look in her eyes. "She looks miserable, man," he said, "like she's got nothing left." I finished my drink and simply nodded. It didn't matter anymore. She was nothing to me. I had reclaimed my life, reshaped it on my own terms, free from the weight of her lies. And that feeling, more than justice, more than revenge, was the greatest victory of all. This story has come to an end. Betrayal is not just a mistake. It is a choice to lie, to hide the truth, to destroy the trust that took years to build. And the scariest part is not the act of cheating itself, but how easily a person can pretend, live a double life, and deceive until they are exposed. But the truth always comes out. And with it comes the realization: trust is fragile, and it can be shattered in an instant. If someone close to you has betrayed you, don't look for excuses. Respect yourself. Don't hold on to lies. Life goes on, and there will always be room for people who truly value you and your loyalty. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. When a perfect marriage turns into a game of survival. He was a successful businessman, and she was the owner of a cozy cafe. 13 years together, trust, support, stability. But one day, he appeared in her life, a mysterious Serbian man with the charm of a romance novel hero. At first, it was just innocent conversations, then long walks, and then lies. When the husband realized he was losing not only his wife, but also his dignity, he decided to act. But how far would he go to regain control? Betrayal, revelation, revenge. Who will come out victorious in this game? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. My wife and I have shared 13 years of marriage. Before that, we spent just over a year dating, completely certain that we were soulmates. But lately, I've begun to wonder if that certainty was ever real. I have a steady career. Alongside my brothers, I co-own a jewelry business that we built from the ground up. What started as a modest endeavor has grown into a thriving and lucrative enterprise, something we take immense pride in. While many caution against mixing family with business, for us, it's been nothing but a success. We've always had a strong relationship, devoid of the usual sibling rivalries that often cause professional partnerships to crumble. Meanwhile, my wife pursued her own aspirations. She opened a quaint cafe where patrons could indulge in pastries, sip coffee, and immerse themselves in books. Books have always been a defining part of her identity. She's the kind of person who views literature as more than just a hobby. It's an integral piece of who she is. Before I met her, I found that level of enthusiasm a bit excessive, maybe even annoying. But over time, I learned to accept it. Call it hypocrisy if you want, but I genuinely wanted to see her succeed. I even helped pay the rent for her cafe, given its upscale location and steep costs. Covering that expense allowed her business to finally become profitable, and watching her thrive brought me joy. That's the backdrop. Now here's where things started to shift. At some point in March, she mentioned a new customer. She described him as incredibly handsome. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. We've always been comfortable talking about other people's looks without it causing tension. But something about how she spoke of him felt different. She likened him to the brooding, rugged heroes in her beloved romance novels. Yes, she's a fan of those kinds of stories. From what I've seen, many women obsessed with reading also gravitate toward those over-the-top, dramatic love stories. I've never understood the appeal, but if it makes her happy, I let it be. At first I dismissed it. But the way she described him, her choice of words, reminded me of the way she once gushed about a Russian assassin character from one of her books, a man who fell in love with a woman he met in their apartment complex's laundry room. No, I'm not making that up. That's the kind of story she finds compelling. That day, she only mentioned him in passing, but the very next evening, she brought him up again, saying they had talked for quite a while. From that conversation alone, I learned he was Serbian, had worked as a car dealer, and had recently moved to the US in search of better opportunities. He was struggling to settle in, but was trying to land a job at a local dealership. Within 10 minutes, I knew he was tall, blonde, well-dressed, spoke with an accent, and had a refined taste in books, particularly westerns and fantasy epics like The Lord of the Rings. My wife talks about her customers all the time, so initially, I chalked it up to her usual storytelling. But there was something about her tone. She wasn't just recounting an interaction. She was romanticizing it, almost as if she were turning this man into one of her fictional protagonists. Fortunately, the fascination seemed to fade, and she stopped bringing him up as frequently. That was a relief. He was just another regular at her cafe, not a main character in our nightly conversations. One afternoon, I even visited her cafe to drop off lunch and spotted a man in the corner who perfectly matched her description. There was no doubt in my mind. That was Peter. And then things started getting strange. One evening, she walked through the door wearing a dreamy, almost giddy expression. When I asked what had put her in such a good mood, she casually revealed that Peter had walked her home. They had spent the journey deep in conversation about books, and before parting ways, he had asked her out on a date. She told me she declined, explaining that she was married. According to her, Peter was immediately apologetic, took her hand in a gentlemanly way, wished her a good night, and left. I asked why that encounter had made her so happy. Her response? It felt like something straight out of a book. That irritated me. She was treating these interactions with Peter as though they were lifted from the pages of her favorite romance novels. Still, I tried to be rational. She had been upfront about his advances and had made it clear that she was married. If she wanted to, she could have easily lied about her marital status. So I pushed my unease aside, convincing myself there was no reason to overreact. Ignoring that feeling was a mistake. About a week later, she came home holding a bouquet of flowers and immediately placed them in a vase. When I asked where they came from, she nonchalantly admitted that Peter had given them to her. Nothing significant, just a small token of appreciation for all the support she had shown him while he was job hunting. That was when my patience snapped. She spoke as if she were completely oblivious to the implications of receiving flowers from a man who had already expressed interest in her. So I asked her outright. Did she not realize that Peter liked her? She admitted that, of course, she knew. After all, he had asked her out. But she insisted the flowers were just a kind gesture, nothing more. That was absolute nonsense. Any man with common sense knows that if you ask a woman out and she turns you down, you don't follow up with flowers unless you're still trying to win her over. It wasn't about a friendly gesture. He was testing boundaries, and given how effortlessly she was indulging him, I knew he wasn't going to stop anytime soon. I was right. 2 days later, she arrived home much later than usual. Almost 2 hours past the time she normally returned. She hadn't mentioned staying out late, which was already unusual. I called her twice. No answer. Instead of blowing up her phone, I chose to wait. And that's when everything truly began to fall apart. Just as I was about to call her for the third time, the door swung open, and she stepped in, practically buzzing with excitement. "You won't believe the night I had," she blurted out, immediately diving into a long-winded story. Apparently, she had guided Peter to the museum, and afterward, they grabbed a slice of American pizza, something he had always wanted to try after seeing it in movies. They spent the evening strolling through the city, talking, eating, and engaging in various activities I had no interest in hearing about. Still, I let her spill it all out. When she finally finished, I met her gaze and asked, "Are you attracted to Peter?" Her expression shifted instantly. Shock, maybe even offense. She denied it without hesitation, assuring me that I was the only person she had feelings for. She insisted she was just being kind, showing hospitality to someone in a foreign country with no friends or connections. Her reasoning made sense, but something about it didn't sit right with me. So, I made it clear, she needed to stop seeing him. That, of course, sparked a heated argument. She accused me of being insecure, said I was overreacting, and insisted I had no reason to feel threatened. She went on, but none of it eased my frustration. Even so, I kept my emotions in check. I didn't yell. I simply held my ground. I told her she could interact with Peter at the cafe since he was a customer, but beyond that, it had to end. To drive my point home, I asked how she'd feel if the situation were reversed. If a Serbian woman had come in to buy a bracelet, and I had decided to take her on a personal tour of the city. She dismissed the idea, claiming she'd understand, but we both knew that wasn't true. By the end of it, I found myself sleeping on the couch. No surprise there. The only silver lining? The topic of Peter seemed to vanish from our conversations, which did wonders for my peace of mind. I knew they'd still see each other at the cafe, but that was a controlled environment. As long as she continued coming home at her usual time every night, I chose to let it go. And for a while, things seemed normal, until one day when I unexpectedly stopped by her cafe and she was nowhere to be found. Peter wasn't there either. That alone didn't prove anything, but her unexplained absence? That was a red flag. I debated whether to wait for her return or ask an employee where she had gone, but I didn't want to cause a scene. Instead, I headed back to my car across the street. Just as I was about to leave, I saw them. She and Peter were walking side by side, their arms intertwined. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them right then and there, to unleash all the anger boiling inside me. But somehow, I held back. I remained in my car, watching as they disappeared into the cafe. Then, I drove away. That was yesterday. Processing it has been torment. I wanted to confront her the moment she got home, but I forced myself to wait. There's an advantage in knowing something the other person doesn't realize you know. It allows you to see through their deception. So, I played it cool. When she walked through the door, I casually asked about her day. She recounted an uneventful work shift, making no mention of spending time with Peter. That was all the confirmation I needed. And that brings me to now. Should I confront her outright, or should I gather more evidence first? I'm leaning toward the latter. Something bigger is happening here, and if I act too soon, I might never uncover the full truth. Update. I found more than I ever wanted to. It took time to muster the courage, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, no matter how much it hurt. I had never been the kind of person to invade my partner's privacy, but I shoved aside my moral reservations. The truth mattered more. The first opportunity came while she was asleep. I took her phone and went straight to her messages. As expected, Peter's name was there. They had been talking non-stop on WhatsApp. I exported their entire chat to a text file and sent it to myself, making sure to erase any trace of what I had done. Then, I checked her gallery. There were several photos of them together, laughing in different locations across the city. Nothing blatantly incriminating, but enough to deepen my suspicions. I sent those to myself as well and deleted the evidence. It took less than 5 minutes to go through everything and put her phone back exactly as it was. Then, I picked up my own phone and started reading. If she had woken up and caught me, I would have come up with an excuse. But she didn't, and what I found made my stomach churn. One conversation stood out among the rest. They had been discussing a book my wife had recommended to Peter. For clarity, let's call her Miranda. Peter. The way the main characters remind me of us, Miranda. Miranda. Yes. That's exactly what I thought. The brooding, mysterious hunk and the artsy girl who's torn between him and her boyfriend. Peter. And passionate, intimate scenes. This part especially reminds me of us. Miranda. I agree. Intimacy is always good. Peter. Except in your case, it's a husband. Peter sent a laughing emoji. Miranda. Yes. And I think that's what makes it even more exciting and fun. Peter. It feels so wrong. I've never cheated before, but I can't say I properly regret it. Miranda. It is wrong, but that's what makes it so hot. Peter. Yep. And I never want this to end. Reading that sent a firestorm of rage through me. I had to leave the house before I did something reckless. I walked aimlessly through the streets, my mind racing, my vision blurring with the weight of betrayal. It felt like I had been wandering for hours. When I finally checked my phone, it was only 3 a.m. Now I know, and I have no idea what to do next. She was still sound asleep. Have you ever felt the gut-wrenching horror of realizing you've been deceived, only to discover that your partner is actually basking in her betrayal? It wasn't just the unfaithfulness that broke me. It was the sheer delight she took in keeping me oblivious. If she had shown even a shred of guilt, perhaps the sting would have been slightly less sharp. But the thrill she got from sneaking around, that was the final straw. When I got home that night, she was still lost in dreams, utterly unaware. I grabbed her phone and went straight to the damning part of her conversation with Peter, using her own device to record every incriminating message. I needed undeniable proof, something irrefutable. Miranda had deluded herself into thinking she was starring in some grand, forbidden love story, straight out of the novels she adored. But casting me as the clueless fool in her fantasy? That was a cruelty I wouldn't tolerate. She had no idea that her little game was over. The divorce was already in motion, and there was no turning back. And Peter? He wouldn't escape unscathed either. I didn't know exactly how I'd make him suffer yet, but I was determined that they'd both feel the kind of agony that cuts straight to the soul. Update. It's done. And it was magnificent. The final chapter of the adulterous Miranda and her Serbian lover has been written. They never realized they should have feared me far more than they did. Let's skip the mundane details. One morning, as Miranda went about her usual routine, I took an Uber and positioned myself across the street. From my spot, I had the perfect view as a process server waltzed into the cafe and handed her the divorce papers in front of everyone. Watching her face crumble in real time, absolutely priceless. I didn't wait around for the fallout. I had seen what I needed. I continued my day as if nothing had happened, enjoying my work and the refreshing silence that followed. No desperate calls, no pathetic attempts at reconciliation. That void of communication was a symphony to my ears. She knew she was caught. There was no way to undo it. At least, that's what I assumed. That night, she came home in pieces, mascara streaked, nose running, completely wrecked. For a brief second, I almost pitied her. Almost. Maybe some long-forgotten remnants of love stirred within me. But they faded as quickly as they came. Through sobs, she kept demanding answers. What had she done? Was this about Peter? That's when it hit me. She had no clue just how much I knew. She was fumbling in the dark, trying to assess the damage, wondering if she had left any loose ends. I considered exposing everything, but instead, I let her believe I had only seen them together once, strolling arm in arm. Her whole demeanor shifted. The begging became defensive, the pleading laced with veiled insults. She called me ridiculous for ending a marriage over something so minor. Sure, she admitted it was wrong to meet up with him, but insisted I was overreacting, jealous, insecure. She oscillated between groveling and gaslighting, unsure which would get her what she wanted. I made the decision easy for her. I told her to pack her things and leave, and she did. That was the official beginning of the divorce process, and let me tell you, it was exhilarating. I had more assets at risk, sure, but I also had the resources to secure top-tier legal counsel. If you ever find yourself in this situation, do yourself a favor. Hire the best lawyer money can buy. It's worth it. With the texts, the pictures, and the subtle confrontations I had previously staged about her behavior, my attorney built an ironclad case. But the real dagger? The financial records? Transactions from our shared account that lined up perfectly with messages where Peter gushed over gifts and fancy dinners. She had been using my money to fund her affair. My lawyer painted her as a scheming, opportunistic gold digger, and watching her squirm in court was a spectacle I thoroughly enjoyed. She tried to fight back, but there was nothing she could use against me. I wasn't flawless, but I was clean. By the time everything was settled, I walked away with everything I needed. I kept the house, I kept the car, and thanks to the undeniable proof of her infidelity, not to mention the fact that I had already helped her set up a business, there was no alimony. The judge saw right through her. The only thing she got to keep was the car I had originally gifted her. A small price to pay for my victory. Now, about Peter. Making him suffer was trickier, but I found my opportunity. One afternoon, I followed him as he left the cafe, tracking his steps down a quiet street. When the moment was right, I called his name. He turned, confused, and before he could react, I drove my fist into his jaw. The impact split his lip, sent him stumbling. It hurt like hell, but the satisfaction was worth every ounce of pain. He was too stunned to retaliate. Maybe he knew he had no justification, no moral ground to stand on. He simply got up and walked away. I wanted to do more, but anything beyond that would have invited legal trouble. Still, knowing he'd walk around with the mark of my fury, that was enough. Miranda's misery, however, was far from over. Remember the cafe I had been paying rent for? Well, the next payment loomed, and with its prime location, it wasn't cheap. When the deadline arrived, she called me, her voice trembling. She begged for help, pleaded for just one more favor. But I was done. I told her to sell her car if she needed money that badly, and hung up. The calls continued for days, each one met with silence. Eventually, she sold the car. I knew this because she called me just to curse me out. Apparently, I was the heartless one, the villain for abandoning her at her lowest. I simply reminded her of how thrilling she had found sneaking around. Her only response was silence. Now, I wait. If karma is real, she'll lose the cafe too. Without my financial support or my bookkeeper covering her mistakes, her failure is inevitable. Watching everything she built crumble has been the most gratifying part of all. And me? I'm standing strong, single, financially secure, and completely at peace. Don't get me wrong, the betrayal and divorce were brutal. But in the end, you either let the past consume you or you move forward. And that's exactly what I'm doing. To everyone who offered advice and support, you have no idea how much it meant. You helped me reclaim my life. This story has come to an end. Betrayal is not just infidelity. It is a blow that shatters trust and destroys years of shared life. In this story, we see how one reckless step can turn love into war and romantic fantasies into a real tragedy. But the most important thing is not the betrayal itself, but how you respond to it. You can break down, drown in resentment, or you can pull yourself together, gather evidence, and come out victorious. Do not let betrayal destroy you. Respect yourself, protect your boundaries, and remember, in the end, the truth is always stronger than the lie. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.